Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh.
I'm Adam.
Adam in the house. Homies, homegirls, homeboys, home trans. Thanks for tuning in. And today, Adam, let's go over some topics that are on our minds, topics that are on our listeners' minds, sum up some listener questions. And let's start with, and this is kind of, we touched on this a little, and we're going to be publishing an episode. If we haven't published it yet, we're going to be publishing an episode on like you being a stay-at-home dad, homeschooling your kids. But I've been hearing a lot, and I've been asked a lot about with this new lockdown, which of course we know it's temporary, but culturally it could end up being permanent as far as working from home or just the idea of doing everything at home. And one of the concerns that I've been hearing a lot, it has to do with kids and kids not socializing as much as previous generations. Now kids apparently, they're introduced to iPads early, they're introduced to technology early, they're getting cell phones in elementary school. I mean iPhones in elementary school. Oh, yeah. And so parents are concerned because A, they don't want their kids to become hermits, just stuck at home doing work all day or conversing with the world digitally. But B, even the parents who do have kids who are currently teenagers or currently in their 20s, they're also complaining that their older children, they don't communicate with them. It's all through text. It's all not even FaceTime. It's just text. They don't pick up phone calls. Forget about meeting in person and speaking well or communicating in person. This is a huge concern. So I wanted to just kind of touch on it and get your thoughts, Adam.
Yeah. So the big thing in regards to, the homeschooling aspect is people need to realize that what we're going through right now with what I call crisis schooling isn't what homeschoolers go through. I mean, the idea that homeschoolers just stay at home and don't socialize is not, it might have been true back whenever you and I were kids and the internet didn't exist, but it is in no way true anymore. This social isolation during this coronavirus is a legitimate concern, though. I mean, as long as you have to social distance, obviously they're not going to, be going out with friends and hanging out, and they're doing, like Zoom meetups and that kind of stuff. But that's just not the same. So, I mean, it's definitely a concern right now. But if it continues this way and, we're having to social distance some, but not to the extent that we are now, I would tell people not to worry too much about it. Now, in terms of like the whole thing about kids with phones, I've actually heard from my sister-in-law. She has two kind of tweens, and actually one of them's about to be 13, so he's about to be a teen. That basically, if you don't have a cell phone by the time and like a smartphone by the time you're like 11 or 12, people start making fun of you.
Yeah.
You're picked on, or you might even be 10, but it's like you're picked on. People say you're poor. People just, it's all sorts of stuff that happens, and that's just something that we're just have to deal with as a society, because that's not something that adults are going to really be able to do anything about.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember when I was in elementary school, there was one kid got one, and then because he got it, his mom and another kid's mom in the same class were good friends. So that other kid's mom was like, "Oh, I need to get my son this," and then it just like caught all these. It was basically all these moms
keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah. And this was 1999. So this was 21 years ago. And I was 10 years old. Not even. I was 9 years old when my friend he got it for his birthday. It was his 10th birthday. He got a cell phone, and to me back then, I was like, my mom didn't even have a cell phone. My dad had one, but my mom didn't. So I was like, why the heck does a 10-year-old need a cell phone? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's just completely unnecessary. But you know what? To be quite frank, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be getting my son a cell phone when he's in elementary school, because it is. I think it's good for parents to know where their kids are and to call them and find out if they're safe. And like you said, the whole bullying thing. Oh, you're poor. I don't want my kid to have to do it. And I'm not going to be homeschooling my kids, so they'll probably go to public school or private school. But yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I didn't get my first cell phone until 2003. I was 21 years old.
Yeah, well, a lot has to do with when the piece of technology went into mass adoption.
I know. I was way late to the game, though. I didn't want a cell phone at the time, and I still don't want one now. But
I love my cell phone. I think everyone who knows me knows that I've got a problem with my cell phone. It's not. I'm not afraid to address that, to publicly state that. So, but I will say, so going to the question or the topic at hand, well, how do we keep them from just, being stuck in their rooms playing on their cell phone all day? And this is where I think sports is such a big deal. Not just sports, but just activities in general, extracurricular activities, co-curricular activities, because being physically fit is such an important tenet of mine. And sports, like if you play basketball, football, rugby, even tennis, which is a single player sport, you still are physically playing, working the body out and working with other people. You're playing against other people. You're working against other people. You're being coached. And so you get you just learn a lot about teamwork and about social skills, sociability, emotional intelligence, I think, through not just sports, but extracurricular activities in general.
Yeah, and it's also important just to set down expectations and guidelines. I mean, that's on the parents. I mean, if you give your kid a phone and just say, here's your phone, and don't give them any guidelines for it and say, here's your phone, you can use it at these times. You can't just lock yourself in your room away with it. You can't do this, you can't do that. And just give them the rules, and if they break the rules, their phone goes away. I mean, this is up to each individual parent to really crack down on it, because it's a legitimate fear. I mean, there's a smartphone addiction, there's a cell phone addiction. There's kids who get bullied online, and they get it through their social media, and parents don't know about it because they don't talk to their kids about it, or their kids just only go online. And so it's something that I hate to say it, but you kind of just have to crack down and actually parent because of it. I mean, it can definitely be, technology is a fantastic thing. I mean, it allows us to work from home a lot better than, back in the day, but it's also incredibly dangerous. And that if you just let, 10-year-olds have complete unfettered access to each other, bad things tend to happen. I mean, you see adults with unfettered access to each other and bad things happen. Now you get even less of a developed brain, and, it goes downhill quickly.
Yeah, well, as long as my kid, and look, parents have to lead the way. That's just my opinion. Like, it's not just saying, hey, you're allowed to have the phone for 30 minutes a day, but, the extracurriculars and using technology to improve like technology isn't bad. Like technology, we wouldn't have this our podcast or our businesses if it weren't for technology. Technology, I think, is good, but it's utilizing the technology in a good way rather than a bad way. And so I think being social and building up those emotional skills through technology can be a good thing. Yeah. And we have a couple of episodes coming up about with Paul Balo, who's an expert on utilizing technology the right way and communicating the right way, at least in a professional setting, but even in a social setting, I think technology can be extremely beneficial. I just don't want my kid to be that 25-year-old who can't look people in the eye and say hi. Like literally, and I've met so many people my age who can't do that.
Yeah, and if you want your kid to talk to you on the phone, tell them if they don't pick up, their phone goes away. I mean, at the point where these kids get with their phones and their obsessiveness with them, if you threaten to take it away and they know you can, they're going to follow your rules, especially if you prove to them that you're serious. That's the big problem, is if they don't believe you and you don't follow through on it. But man, if you follow through on it and take their phone away for a day or a weekend or something like that, they'll pick up the phone the next time you call. Or, say, if you don't call me back within 30 minutes.
Yep, that makes sense. So, any more thoughts on this topic before we move on to the next one, Adam?
Nope. You just got a parent, man.
All right. Well, let's move on to the Payroll Protection Program, PPP. We had 2 episodes that touched on this. And we've gotten some emails, gotten some feedback about the PPP program. It turns out most of our listeners did not get any funding, myself included. Didn't get anything. They didn't even get a rejection letter. At least, like, when you apply, we use that Harvard example. Like, oh yeah, just apply to Harvard, and what's the worst that can happen? You'll get rejected. Well, they didn't even send out rejection letters.
Well, I don't know if they're not sending them out because they're just waiting for more money, and you haven't necessarily been rejected. You've just been put on the back burner. I don't think you're going to have to reapply whenever they fund it more.
Well, that ties into why I want to talk about this, and that is, we really went after community banks, and I don't take back what I said about a lot of the community banks, because if you have not implemented technology to expedite this process, then you're done. You're not going to be around in 5 to 10 years. But I will say, these big, large Wall Street banks that was able to utilize the technology, they had so many applications, like they never-ending amounts of applications. And it seems, according to some of my sources, that literally all they did was they did like a sort of the small businesses that needed the most amount of funding. So I think you were allowed to get funding of up to $2 million. So they basically just did a sort, and just from the top, they just went down until they ran out of money. And so that's why the little guy, people like me, people like our listeners, we weren't approved, because
sitting out at the curb with our little tin cans, still asking for money.
Yeah. But the community banks, the banker who's got that personal touch. So I've heard through my sources that the smaller community banks, if you have a relationship with your banker, then they can essentially vouch for you and push your application. I mean, again, it's like applying for a job or a college. They can push your application for you, push it directly to the SBA. And so I actually personally know people who have businesses that do less than what my business, at least on the PPP side, they don't make as much revenue-wise, but they got approved because they had that personal touch. They had that relationship with their banker, and they worked out some kind of a deal with their banker, something like, hey, if you push this through, like, I'll refer 5 of my friends to you. And so that's how I found out about this, because I was one of the referred people. And so several friends of mine got their applications pushed through from these small community banks where the competition is less, the applications are less, and they got their funding.
And so the people who just went through the SBA's website were just left out in the cold?
Well, so I'm talking only about the PPP. So the EIDL.
Sorry. That's true. Okay. Yeah. Apologies.
The EIDL, you have to go through the SBA website. The PPP, you have to go. They said the only reason why I didn't do more research, or really I couldn't have done more research because nobody knew what the hell was going on. but it was very stringent. Like, whatever bank your business is with, that's a bank you have to apply with. So I was like, okay, that made it easy. It took me 5 minutes to do the application, and I was feeling good. I was like, oh, wow, like I'm one of the first people to do it. And like I said, it turns out they just did a sort and started from the top and just went down until they ran out of funds. And this is Again, this is not the government. This is the banks. The banks have they can decide who to give it to and who not to give it to. Because the SBA will probably end up approving anybody who comes through its mailbox.
Yeah,
so the banks eventually. So the banks, it seems, prioritized, at least the big Wall Street banks, they prioritize the folks who had 50 plus employees and who people who needed the most amount of money. So community banks, you're not completely worthless. You're actually could end up becoming a huge lifesaver for a lot of people. So for our listeners out there listening, I mean, by the time this episode airs, so within the next couple of days, if not, in fact, the PVP probably has opened up by now by the time this airs, just consider that option. Don't just think that Wells Fargo, it didn't work out the first time, so the second time they're going to be like, oh, yeah, sorry about that. Here's your money. I wouldn't be so trustworthy.
You wouldn't be trustworthy of banks like Wells Fargo? They've been so good to us for the entire time. They've never let us down.
It's, oh my God, HSBC, Wells Fargo. Anyway, that's a completely different topic. So yeah, regarding the stimulus bill, though, or sorry, we should talk about the next stimulus bill. I wanted to talk about this because we've already passed a lot of stimuli. But the next stimulus bill, I don't know if you saw the proposal, Adam.
I have not.
Oh wow, okay, good. I think you're gonna love this. I know your ideology, but you know what? You may not love it because you should qualify. So I've been saying we'll talk about Dr. Stephen Hotze later in the episode, but I've kind of been along his line of, look, we got to get the economy back. We gotta get back to work. But at the same time, Adam, it seems like people are really enjoying just kind of hunkering down at home. The $1,200 stimulus checks just went into hit people's accounts a couple of days ago. This is pretty crazy. There are people who I know who they hate Donald Trump. Like, all I saw on their Facebook was like, Trump, he's the worst. I hate him. He's a douchebag. And they got their stimulus check a few days ago, and all of a sudden they're like, I just got this free money in my bank account. Like, I'm gonna vote for Trump now. Go Trump. He's the man. It's funny to see that, but at the same time, I think people surprisingly are starting to get kind of complacent at home and being like, oh well, I just got $1,200. I didn't do jack shit. And on top of that, I filed for unemployment. Got even, another $1,000 a month. So the new stimulus bill, and again, you said you didn't see it, but it was like, wow, because I ran the math, I ran the numbers, and I was like, there is legit 80% of this country, there is no incentive to go back to work. Absolutely no incentive.
Are you talking about, is this the $600 extra for unemployment?
No. So this one, they're going to up your monthly stimulus check. So previously it was $1,200 in April. They're going to up it for really indefinitely. So definitely May, but a lot just depends on how long this unemployment situation goes on and how bad things get. But they're going to up it to $2,000 a month. All right. And for kids, $500. So that stays the same. For kids, it's $500 per kid. So if you do the math, I actually, for a few people I know, actually you fit into this bill. A lot of people I know are in this boat. So for two adults, that would come out to $4,000 for the month. And if those two adults, if they're married and they have kids, let's assume that they have 4 kids, which is what you have. Mm-hmm. You get an additional $2,000 a month because $500 per kid times 4 is $2,000. And then on top of that, you can file, if you're unemployed, you can file for unemployment. And this obviously varies by state, but let's just, to keep the numbers as conservative and round as possible, let's say $1,000 a month per person. So if it's 2 adults, that would be $2,000 in that household per month. So the total is $8,000 per month in cash. That's direct if you want to call it digital cash, that's going into your bank account. $8,000 a month comes out to $96,000 a year. But it doesn't end there, Adam. It does not end there. Under the new plan, you don't need to pay your mortgage. You don't need to pay your rent. So we're going to, later in this season, we're publishing a real estate episode, and you hear us say that you should always take out a mortgage. And I made the argument that you should always put as little down as possible without paying property mortgage insurance, PMI, without paying mortgage insurance, as little down as possible. If you could put zero down, put zero down. But they are forgiving, not delaying, not withholding. They're forgiving mortgages in full during that time period up to 1 year. So you'll never have to pay it back. And they are also forgiving rent, so you don't need to pay your rent. So all those people who paid
This is
cash
never
for
going to pass.
Well, this is a proposed bill, right?
Yeah, this is never going to pass.
Well, this is like the Democrats' like huge bill, right? Like this is like what they're Cory Booker, Ilhan Omar, all these senators and House. I don't know, Adam, because I thought when this shutdown first hit in early March and people were talking about stimulus checks, I was one of those people who said, this is never going to pass. It's not going to happen. There's no way that the government is just going to give free money to people.
Oh, no, I knew that was going to happen. I mean, that happened back in the financial crisis. I mean, they were definitely going to give the money, but they're never going to give $8,000 a month to people like that. And they're never going to. The Senate is never going to allow a year of no mortgage or rent. I mean, that would destroy. That would destroy way more than it would help.
What would it destroy?
Oh, it would destroy the mortgage industry.
There's a completely separate plan for the mortgage industry. So it's not like the government's not trying to screw anyone. They're trying to help everyone. So we're not going to get into those details because it gets a little more complicated when it comes to but the entire mortgage industry gets bailed out as well. So it's not like you're screwed as a mortgage banker or a mortgage company. You actually could end up making more money according to the plan. Just like the people would end up making more. I mean, 80% of the population would actually make more money. Not 80, it's a fraction of that 80%. Would make more money than working their regular job.
I don't see it happening.
I don't think the entire thing will pass, but I certainly think what people aren't understanding is, again, 80% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, and they're going to be running out of cash by June 1st.
Oh, absolutely.
And unemployment is about to hit, you'll see in the May, actually by the time this episode publishes, it's hit double digits, unemployment. And in June, once that unemployment report comes out, that first Friday in June, it's going to crack 20%. So there are estimates that are saying this could go as high as 35% unemployment. I don't know. Let's stick with the 20%, that's a lot. That's Great Depression numbers. That's not Great Recession. Great Recession numbers did not. I think the worst we got, Adam, do you remember? Was it like 12%?
The Great Recession? Yeah, I think it was somewhere around 10%.
Yeah, so it was like in the low 10s. Let's just say 10 to 12%, but this is definitely going to be greater than 20%. And Goldman Sachs, a bunch of these other well-known economists at big banks and companies are saying that this is almost certain to cross 25% and could go above 30%, 35%. That's a lot of pain, Adam. That is a ton of pain. And look, I don't agree. You know me, I lean right. I am not for a lot of these policies. I'm not. But the government has done things that I would have never imagined it would do over the past 15 years. It was never in the history books. Anytime I'd study the Great Depression or any recession, they never did any of these things. And the Fed, same thing.
Yeah, so here's the big issue. Like, you look at what got us out of the Great Depression with the Public Works program, and that, which is something that could be done now with the jobs guarantee. The problem is the jobs guarantee wouldn't really work right now because that involves working. And the issue that we're having now is that it's not conducive to stopping the virus to have people go out and just straight work. Because The jobs guarantee is designed to solve societal ills by putting unemployed people to work doing jobs that need to be done. And so if you get something like this, like a pandemic, you essentially have to make your job guarantee just be you're going to get your paycheck no matter what, which I think is quite possible. But if they're going to do something like this and roll out the $8,000 a month for a family, it's going to have an end date. I mean, obviously, most people don't have 4 kids; they have 2, and so you're looking more like what, $7,000 a month.
You're looking at a lot of money that you'll be getting for free. And look, I know people personally. I have family members, like extended family members, who under this plan, they would actually like double their income. I'm not even making that figure up. They would double their income under this government handout. Mm-hmm. And they work very hard. They work way harder than I do. Way harder than I do. So it's a plan, like you said, it's a negotiation, right? These are always negotiations. This is how they're starting out. But the end product, the point that I'm making is the end product is still going to be, people getting these handouts are going to love it. All right, let's put it that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, and let's be honest, even people who say they don't love handouts are going to love it.
Yeah, and the people who don't get it, they're the ones who are essentially paying for it.
I tell you what, why don't we not give it to the libertarians and see how well that goes?
I actually agree with that because I lean libertarian, but I think when it comes to fiscal and monetary policy, I think libertarians are complete idiots, and they're annoying brats too. They're really annoying about, abolish the Fed. I'm like, what planet do you live on? They're obsessed with abolishing the Fed. It's like they go to sleep just saying in their dreams, abolish the Fed, abolish the Fed. But anyway, you're absolutely, I can get behind that. I can definitely get behind that plan. Or they can just not take it.
Yeah.
If they get it, they can just be like, hey, you know what, I'm libertarian and I'm going to give it away. But you know that they're not going to do that.
No, absolutely not. 100% no.
But yeah, the mortgage thing, the rent thing, that's, again, we know it may not get passed, but my first problem when I read about this was, oh shit, what's going to happen to all my properties? Like I can't survive. And then I see the section about homeowners and about how your mortgage is forgiven. And then I'm thinking, man, all those people who paid cash for their houses, like they just wasted their or they didn't just waste it, but or people who paid off their homes, like my parents, right? They paid off their 30-year mortgage. They paid it off early. And if they refinanced or did a reverse mortgage, well, forgiven for a year, So that's why I always, take out the mortgage. Debt and real estate is good. But that's not cash in your bank, but that's still savings. That's still if you have, the average I took was $2,000 a month in mortgage. Your mortgage is probably higher than that, Adam. I know mine's higher than that. But, just to keep the numbers round, that's $24,000 a year in savings.
Yeah.
So you add $24,000 to $96,000. That's $120,000. That's almost like making $120,000 for doing nothing. But hey, desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, and that's going to be something. I mean, that's one of the things people say when tragedies and situations like this happen, the government overreach starts and then it never goes away. That's true in some situations, but this is something that will not be sustainable. This is something that when these things get put in place, there will be an end date, and then they'll have to vote to extend it.
Yeah, so in this plan, it's a 12-month program, and it starts, so it's going to be retroactive. It starts in March of this year, 2020, and it goes all the way through the end of February 2021.
I think the Democrats will be able to get a 6 months without having to renew it. I'd be shocked if they actually got a full year.
Well, if it's even 6 months, that's a huge win for the Democrats. That's a huge win for all these people who just want to stay at home, who are going to qualify for this plan. Yeah. And so that's what I'm saying, where people have kind of gotten used to it. And they're like, hey, I can get used to this lifestyle of just watching Tiger King all day and getting checks in my bank account and, unemployment and I don't have to pay for my rent. And if you're on food stamps.
I still think the fundamental human being wants to work. I mean, if you look at, sitting around and not doing anything is great for a little while, and then it gets boring. It gets real boring. I think I think kind of human nature has proven it to be, is that when given a choice, human beings work. It may not be exactly what they want to do, but I think stopping work is when you start dying, and that we'll see people who might love this for a little while, but eventually they'll want to get back to work.
That's her opinion. I don't know. Look, I'm with you in that my philosophy, I love working, right? But I know a lot of people, personal friends of mine, who absolutely detest work. Like they hate it. It is the bane of their existence, like Boxer is for you. They just don't like it. And
well, they don't like the work they're
doing.
doing. If you got them something they were interested in.
I don't know. Again, I don't think we'll know until a program like this rolls out. And look, I lived in Baltimore, and I can tell you 80%, again, that's a data that I didn't make that up. That's actually like factual. 80% of that city does not work. They don't like to work. They could easily get a job, but they don't, because they don't need to. They're already on the government dole. And you cannot walk around the city of Baltimore without, this was back before weed was even legalized, but it was just weed central everywhere, at least in public. In private, there must have been all sorts of other stuff going on. So yeah, anyway, we'll just have to see. We don't know, but I'll tell you, a lot of people are happy about this, just like the Trump hater who all of a sudden is like, oh yeah, I love Trump now, I'm voting for him. He gave me $1,200, even though all he did was sign a bill. So
yeah, you gotta love how everything's given credit to the president, no matter who it is. It's like, oh yeah, they gave me this money, not all the lawmakers.
Well, again, I just have to ask a question. And look, I'm not insinuating anything, but the timing of all this, it's. I mean, I just want to bring it up. I don't want to say anything else. I'm just saying the timing of just giving people money. What, 6 months before the election? I'm just stating a fact. That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying any more. So. Any final thoughts about that, Adam?
Nope. No, not today.
Well, so talking about that bill again, because another major talking point regarding all these stimulus bills, public companies have gotten a lot of heat for the stock buybacks.
Oh, as well they should.
Yeah, they should. So public companies, they'll essentially, the whole stock buyback practice is going to be banned under the new stimulus package, and really under the recent one, the small business package that was passed, and also the airline industry bailout and other industry bailouts. Those recent stimulus, they put limits on the stock buyback. So 2008, 2009, it was, really those bailouts were mostly for Wall Street. Like you brought up that, some regular people got some money, but it was...
Yeah, in 2008, 2009, it was like 99% went to the big companies.
The banks. Yeah. And that's why this time they're making way more of an effort to put the person, the business, and the regular U.S. taxpayer number one. We're going to take care of it. We're not going to bail out the banks. We're going to go after these stock buybacks, put all these limitations. So good for that. Good for our politicians to kind of wake it. Look, no one's perfect the first time around. So they've woken up to that. But I just think it's important to know that these large companies, there are restrictions put in place.
You take the money. You take the money. You follow the rules.
Yeah. So that's.
You want to keep doing stock buybacks? Good. Don't take the money.
Yeah, and so if you have a household income above $260,000, then you're essentially paying for this. So you get nothing, and I actually feel bad. Yeah, I feel bad for rich people, because you don't get anything. You're paying for this program, and on top of that, you still have to pay your mortgage and your rent and all the other goodies that the person or the household making $250,000 doesn't have to pay for. So that's a problem.
They're only doing the rent and mortgage cessation for the lower income?
If you qualify for the plan, so this is what, again, it's all proposed right now, right? So if you qualify, if you're part of a household income under $260,000, then all this applies to you. 100%. Everything applies to you. If you are above the $260,000 per year annual, then none of this applies. And the same thing with the stimulus check. The stimulus check that just went out,
it phases out.
if you made above, I think it was 170 or 175,000 household income, you weren't even a part of it. Forget about it. Like you didn't even get a notice or a letter from the government thanking you for paying your taxes. You were completely out of it. So that's a whole problem with wealth redistribution, because if you're in that bell curve that qualifies, you think this is the greatest thing in the world, and you're like, I'm going to go out and vote for Trump. But if you fall outside of it, then you feel like you're getting gypped. Even if you have a lot of money, it's like, well, that's why I was a huge fan of Andrew Yang, and I thought he kept it real. He's somebody who I was a part of the Yang gang. I got a bumper sticker on my computer, because everyone across the board, everyone gets a flat $1,000, not $2,000, because $1,000 is small enough to where you're still motivated to go out and work. So it's just whether you're Warren Buffett or you're the homeless guy on the street, $1,000 across the board.
Yeah, you and I have very different political beliefs when it comes to that stuff.
Well, it's just the most fair, and people were, I mean, they were loving it. Like, it was the first time I saw conservatives that were like, oh wow, like this actually makes sense. Like right now the U.S. is the only. We're not going to get too deep into this, but the U.S. is the only nation that doesn't have a VAT. The only developed nation that doesn't have a VAT, and there was no wealth redistribution. There was no taking from the rich and giving to the poor. It would have been taxation on large corporations like Amazon that pay $0 in tax and are able to circumnavigate, avoid taxes. And on top of that, he would have cut the income tax altogether. Wow, like a Democrat who said that he would have cut the. I mean, his philosophy was, why would you want to discourage people from doing something good? Why would you want to discourage them for making themselves better? Why would you want to discourage them from working? Why would you want to discourage them from hiring people? Like, that doesn't make sense. You should discourage them from like smoking or drinking or doing bad things or doing things that are destructive to society. And I'm like, dude, this guy, he's the first well, he's not a politician, but first guy telling it like it is, everything that I believed in. So anyway, he got like close to last place, and he did a lot better than people thought he would.
I wholeheartedly disagree with universal basic income, which you probably wouldn't have expected from me, but I wholeheartedly disagree with it.
Well, you can't just end right there. You got to give us at least 3 sentences on why.
Oh, fine. Because it doesn't do anything to improve society. I'm fully in support of the jobs guarantee, which I mentioned earlier. It eliminates unemployment completely. If you don't want to work, then you don't work and you don't get paid. But if obviously it keeps things like disability and what is that? So Medicaid. But if you want a job, you go to your local government or your local whatever branch they make, and you say, I got fired from my job, I need a job. And they come back and they say, here's a list of jobs we have. And each local municipality gets to make up what they want. So they'll say, we need people to do this, 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 and this, because these are our problems that need to be fixed. And then you get a job and you're paid, say, $10 an hour. And that becomes essentially the minimum wage. And because businesses that want to hire workers, they have to offer at least what the workers are getting at that. Because what do employers want? They want workers, and they want people, and the workers that they want are not workers who've been unemployed for a long time. The longer you're unemployed, the more unemployable you are. And so this keeps people working, it keeps their skills up, it keeps them useful, and that way it all works out.
I agree. I agree with everything that you said, except it's not that I don't agree with it, but it's really a question. So I went through 2 different political government leadership programs here in Tampa. One with the county, Hillsborough County, one with the mayor of Tampa Bay, the former mayor of Tampa Bay, Bob Buckhorn. And the biggest thing that I learned, the answer to every question that I had, like, why don't you do this?
Let me guess, how are you going to pay for it, right?
Well, my question would be, you're right. My question would be, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And every answer would be, we don't have the budget. We don't have the budget.
The federal government does. So the federal government pays the states back. That's how it works.
The federal government would pay. Okay.
Yeah, okay. It's a federal jobs guarantee, but each municipality gets to choose what needs to be done in their area.
I actually think that's a good idea.
Congratulations, you're now an MMT believer.
Well, I've always I was a little skeptical of MMT simply because I hadn't seen it in play. But after 2008, 2009, after the Great Recession, then I was like, whoa, all those MMT people were absolutely right. And all those moron libertarians that I followed to buy gold and lose thousands of my, hard-earned college capital, they were completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were absolutely wrong. And so that's where I made fun of libertarians before. It's the U.S. federal government and the Federal Reserve are like basic economics does not apply to fiscal policy or monetary policy. It absolutely does not, because the U.S. has a world reserve currency.
It's not even because of that. Other countries can do the exact same thing. The reserve currency doesn't matter. What it matters is that you have your own currency, that you are
sovereign nation.
Yeah, you're a sovereign nation with your own currency, and you don't borrow in any other denominated currency. As soon as you borrow another currency, it ruins it. You don't have to have the greatest military. And the big thing is, the main thing that taxes are used for, taxes are not used to raise income to pay for things. Taxes are used to pull resources out to control inflation. And also they're used to give your money value. Because if you don't have to pay your taxes in U.S. dollars, then why do you care what the U.S. dollar is worth? Why do you care about collecting U.S. dollars? You could be selling it in Mexican pesos or euros or whatever you want to do. Why do we do business in U.S. dollars here in the United States? Because we have to pay our taxes in it.
Yeah. The U.S. issues its own currency. We're not on the euro or the yen or anything like that. The U.S. is a sovereign nation that issues its own currency.
Yep.
So I learned, it took me about 7 years to understand that and to accept it. And that's why I've been actually okay with these bailouts and with all these things, because the U.S. is just it's the greatest nation.
And so people are going to listen to me and say, well, when does inflation happen? It happens when the federal government starts competing with the private sector for resources. So, if you say the federal government is needs all of the cotton to do this one thing, then suddenly the private businesses are trying to buy up the cotton that the federal government's trying to buy, and it creates the hyperinflation.
I'll tell you, when it comes to inflation, Adam, again, these libertarians, those books are completely wrong, because common sense actually it does not apply to the federal government. And we did not see really any inflation after all these bailouts in 2008, nope. 2009. Like, nope. Deflation has been a way bigger concern. And I personally, after I started Christian Media and Marketing from home, I see this on a day-to-day basis where deflation is the bigger issue. Deflation, because technology is the greatest, not the greatest, but it is the greatest. But technology is the invention. It's the most deflationary invention in human history.
Yep.
And so this whole idea of inflation of wages, inflation of things is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. Technology continues to move forward. The Wuhan virus happens. Well, guess what? Technology, IT, has continued to move forward and do its thing. So this idea of inflation, I can't see it happening in the United States. And the other thing is, like I said, U.S. has a world reserve currency. After all these bailouts, after all these stimulus the stimulus that was put in, you would have thought, gold would have gone up, and that's what the textbook would tell you. Gold's going to go up, inflation's going to happen. Guess what? The dollar got stronger after all this happened, because now other nations, other countries, during times of crisis, what currency do they want to own? The U.S. dollar. They actually put their resources and invested in the United States and in the U.S. dollar. And the stock market, this is the weird thing, the stock market, and look, I could be completely wrong about what's going to happen, but it's like Dow 25,000 now, close to Dow 25,000. And it could end up going, I think it actually will go to all-time highs, despite all of this horrible depression-like unemployment data. And the only reason is because the foreign investors, the foreign countries, they still have faith in the United States and in the U.S. dollar. So they're getting into stocks as well.
Can't say I disagree. You got to put your money somewhere. Put it in the safest place.
Yep. So, for all those getting the stimulus, good for you. Congratulations. But it's not going to last forever. The punch bowl is going to be taken away. So continue to listen to our podcast, continue to work from home, and improve yourself, improve your skills so that you can go back, get a good job, and be just fine, at least financially and professionally. But going back to Trump, it's just we started this topic about how Trump, people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump now. And the same polls that had him winning in 2016, it was, like Rasmussen, USC, Investor Business Daily, his approval ratings are going back up because of these handouts. It has nothing to do with his response to the pandemic or the health of people. Look, folks, at the end of the day, people care about their dollars and cents even more than they care about their health. And so it's, again, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to say any more.
All right. Well, since you're not going to say any more, I'll go ahead and say it for us. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Work From Home Show with Adam Schrader and Naresh Vissa. Visit us online, www.workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. You can also send us an email with any questions, concerns, comments you have. hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Sign up for our mailing list. Get a free copy of Naresh's book, 50 Shades of Marketing. And until next time, keep on working from home.